Oh, welcome to Eudaimonia Coaching Live.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for the invitation, Christina. Good to see you.
Thank you for coming. So it is 6 o'clock in the UK, 8 o'clock in Athens, Greece, and in Minnesota, St. Paul's, it
Noon.
is
12 p.m. noon.
noon. So we are sunsetting, but you are just getting started, hopefully. So welcome to Eudaimonia Coaching. We have Luis Moreno with us today. Thank you for joining us. So let me give you a little bit of an intro about who we have with us today. So Luis, who is our beautiful guest here, conducts training on human-centered leadership and emotional intelligence to executives, leaders, professionals, and students around the world, so global. He has an MBA in strategy and marketing from the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota and has over 18 years of work experience in 7 Fortune 500 companies. He was named among the 40 under 40 by the Minneapolis St. Paul Business Journal and is a member of the Young American Leaders Program at Harvard Business School. Welcome, Luis.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the kind intro. Appreciate it.
Yes. So you know a little bit about me, but for those of us who don't know anything about me, I am Christina Garidi. I am Greek Japanese. I'm a purpose and career coach and founder of Eudaimonia Coaching on a mission to democratize human flourishing. I coach ambitious professionals to decode their inner purpose and align it with their careers. I introduced the Eudaimonia Success Model in 2018 globally as a TEDx speaker, and I am writing my book, How to Access the Eudaimonic State of Mind. And you might wonder, how did we get together and why we decided to do this live stream? Well, we were wondering how purpose, emotional intelligence, human-centered leadership, and eudaimonia are connected. So hopefully we will find out and you will be able to tell whether these themes are connected at all. I'm very excited about that. How about you, Luis?
I am very excited, and there's a connection. We pay attention. Everything is connected, so we
Yeah.
can connect things, and we can learn from anything. Sometimes I know, even culturally, in some cultures, people don't think that they can learn something from somebody that is younger than them, for example. But I'll tell you that my biggest teachers are my own teachers, my own sons. Sorry, so I learn a lot from my sons, and they are a lot younger than I am.
Absolutely. And normally we would learn something that we haven't thought is possible by younger people who think about them in different ways, as opposed to us educated people that have gone through university, education, and so on. Will this be recorded and available for future viewing, says Jeannie. Absolutely. We will share snapshots for sure, but Luis will have it recorded on his YouTube as well, and I will upload later as well. So thank you for joining, Jeannie. Where are you joining from? Let us know. So I think it will be interesting to get started on how we connected. Apart from the fact that Luis has a beautiful Venezuelan accent, and I only know that because my Spanish teacher was Venezuelan when I was studying in the UK, because I wanted to learn how to speak Spanish with the best accent available. Sorry, guys. Then I've been told Venezuelan Spanish is the best, and then my teacher was Venezuelan. But actually, this is not the way we met. Luis has an amazing way in which he connects with people. So when we connected, it was just, impossible not to connect again and again and again and unfold how we are actually connected. Even today, I stood up and, I showed him my top, and it's a Snoopy happy. And then what did you tell me, Luis?
Yeah, that actually the creator of Snoopy is from here, from St. Paul, Minnesota. So there is actually the place where he used to live. You can go and visit it on Snelling Avenue here in St. Paul. That's where I live. So it's a connection. Everything, nothing is a coincidence.
Absolutely, and I'm a huge fan of Snoopy and Peanuts and all the not animation, but manga and stuff like that. So thanks, Jeannie, Ashland, Ohio. Welcome. So nice to have you with us today. Brilliant. So we will get started with some of the questions I have for Lewis to uncover how it's all connected today. So get us started, Lewis. Tell us about, as part of course, of emotional intelligence as a whole, which is a huge topic and it has so many different branches, but empathy. Empathy is what connected us and what allows people to connect. So what is it? I know it's a huge definition to try and, squeeze in, but also what inspired you to teach that? Because this is what you enable leaders to tap into.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Actually, one of the motivations for me to get into this work was the fact that I realized that there was a misunderstanding of what empathy was, right? So many people think of empathy as, well, you know someone and the person is sad because something bad happened to them, something sad happened to them. And empathy is about, kind of feeling sad with the person, being in that person's shoes, and, maybe giving your condolences. And that actually is that's a manifestation of empathy. That is empathy, but that's not all that empathy is, for many reasons. But an important one is that empathy is not only about understanding emotions, but it's also about understanding thoughts and experiences. So there are three kinds of empathy. The first one is the one that most people would be familiar with, which is emotional empathy, right? It's understanding how other people feel. Right. Then the second kind of empathy is cognitive empathy, which is about understanding how somebody else thinks. So it's following the mechanics of the thinking pattern of somebody else and understanding, oh, I can see, Christina, I know why you are thinking that way. It's because I have followed the mechanics and the logic of your thinking. And then the third one, which is called empathic concern or empathetic concern, some experts call it, and some experts call it compassion empathy, is actually when you have the willingness to do something to help somebody with something that they are even thinking, feeling, or experiencing. So an easy way to think about it, empathic concern, would be the opposite of cruelty. In cruelty, somebody enjoys, experiences pleasure by injecting pain in someone else, or it could be an animal, it could be a person, it could be something else. Whereas empathic concern, empathetic concern, will be the opposite. What you would enjoy is not to cause the pain, but rather to do something, an actual action, to reduce whatever the bad experience that person is experiencing. Now, something very important to clarify is that when somebody has empathy, right, when you have empathy, you always think of, well, empathy is a good person that wants to do well, but you can actually, a bad person can use the power of empathy to do bad things because, for example, through cognitive empathy, you can learn how somebody else thinks, and you can use that knowledge to manipulate the person. So, for example, if you think of bad politicians, right, with bad politicians can use the power of cognitive empathy to understand, okay, what are my voters interested in? And then I basically, I adjust my language to speak to them and tell them the things that they want to hear. And I'm going to promise them the things that they need so they can vote for me. And then once they vote for me, then I may not do what I said that I would. But in this particular case, I used the power of empathy, not necessarily to produce good, but I did it for my own personal agenda, right? So that's why that's an important piece to understand with empathy. Empathic concern is what people sometimes confuse with empathy.
Yeah. So we all have empathy then, but then we use it for different reasons, either personal or wider good. And let's welcome a few of the other people who have joined us. So Anthony from Wicklow in East Coast of Ireland. Hello. And Bakary Konate from Minneapolis, your hometown. And another LinkedIn user from Houston, I can't see. Hard resonance is joy, he says, or she says.
Bakary, greetings to Bakary. Right,
you know them, you can see them, and intuitives are finding each other. Absolutely, we are finding each other. So we all have the empathy soft skill, shall I say, developed, but we have a choice of how we use it, is what you're telling me, right?
Yeah.
And how you were inspired to teach it, because obviously I just realized it is a complex capability that humans have.
It is complex, and it is actually very difficult because there are, if you think of human behavior, there are some natural behaviors that we have by default that actually makes us do things that may not always be in our own interest or in the interest, of society. So in fact, to increase your level of emotional intelligence and to increase your level of empathy, you have to like unlearn some things that, like untrain yourself, unlearn some things, and then relearn, retrain, and basically rewire your brain in one. Because, for example, our brain wants to protect us. So our brain does a number of interesting things. One is your brain doesn't want you to be lied to. So when somebody says something to you, you will doubt what the person is telling you just by nature, because your brain is saying, hey, careful there. You've never seen that with your own eyes. You've never done that. So that may not be true. That person could be. So red flag. So your system becomes like, it tries to protect you. And then basically the guards go up, right? So that seems like a good thing. And it was a good thing with the cavemen, back in many years ago. It was
I
a
don't
good
remember
thing.
those days. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it prevented threats. It prevented, it protected you from potential threats, like a big animal or something that would come and eat you alive. Well, we're not in the jungle. We're not in the caves anymore. We live in cities. So we really don't have to have that sense of a threat, the fight or flight, right? So that is super important that we understand, well, my brain is activating the fight or flight. And that's why, for example, when we work in teams, sometimes you're working in teams and the teams are like competing with each other. They are like, sabotaging each other in their back and stuff. It's because their brains are activate this competitive thing. Like, for me to be able to move forward, I have to make sure that one is, that the other one stays behind and stuff. And then so we are not, in many cases, some people are not naturally wired to be collaborative. So those are skills that you have to pause, you have to think about it, and then you have to retrain yourself. How do I become more self-aware? Self-awareness is not a natural thing that people will have. You need to learn to be self-aware. Self-awareness, self-regulation, your ability to really control and manage your thoughts and your emotion, right? Self-motivation, for example, self-agency, the ability to give yourself, in times of adversity. It is by default, by nature, when something difficult happens in your life, it is natural that you're going to feel defeated. You're going to be discouraged. You're going to lose steam, right? And you're going to lose momentum. But people who train themselves in emotional intelligence have the ability to develop this sense of resiliency that says, even though things are hard for me right now, even though there's adversity, I'm going to keep moving forward, right? And then you have other things like empathy. Empathy is not a natural thing. You need to, learn. Some people are naturally born with empathy and they can increase it, but some other people are not born with a good level of empathy and they need to train and learn. And then interpersonal social skills, that for some people is really easy. It is not very easy for some other people that may experience anxiety, social anxiety, and it's just hard for them to interact and communicate with other people.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I will keep a couple of things that really I learned just now. One of them is that empathy can be used as a competitive advantage when you're competing or collaborating with teams. So it can be the thing we use to actually be able to collaborate with someone, because at 3 levels we can actually align with them and connect with them, but also we can use it as a competitive advantage. And also that it's an important element of resiliency. The fact that, as you said, we need to learn or relearn some things, because highly empathetic people could naturally be trained by the society to be pleasers and just keep giving, and that could be, and we will touch upon that as well. But shall we acknowledge and say hello to Stefania from Finland, Leonor from Minnesota, Woodbury, Joseph from Minneapolis as well. Excited to learn today, Luis. There you go. You've
Hi,
got your
Leonor, Susana. Saludos, my friend. Here's Joseph Mellin, great student. Thank you, Joseph, for making the time to join us today.
I cannot see about the person who said caveman before Flintstones. I'm not sure who is first, but I'm not going to argue. I think you guys know already. And then another wonderful person from Lakeville, Minnesota as well. Wait, I'm learning all the states slowly and steadily. My geography was not strong.
Exactly.
Now.
At the end of the podcast, we'll have a test for you. But we have Adriana from Greece.
Yes, hello, Adriana. Nice to see you. She's also Japanese Greek, and she is a wonderful executive coach as well. So thank you for joining. Really,
Well,
really
I
beautiful.
haven't been to Japan or Greece, but those two countries are on the top of my list. So I make sure
You have
that the
two
next
friends
time
now,
that I get on a plane,
Diana and me,
I
to
have to
take care
go
of
to
you
those.
in both countries.
Yes.
Right, let's go into something that I've asked you from the first time I met you. And it was something that really built on an example you've given me when we were just chit chatting, learning about each other. Um, and that is, how do women and men actually perceive empathy differently? Because you have a lot of experience working with leaders and you have actually noticed the difference. And of course, I latch on to that point. So I want to rehear it and I want to share it with our audiences as well.
Yeah. No, that's actually a very powerful conversation and one that could take us hours, but I know we only have a few minutes. But, if you're ever interested in this, we can get on a training class. But there is an there are multiple layers to emotional intelligence and empathy. We have cultural layers, there are generational layers, there are many layers, and one of them is the gender layer. And there are important differences between males and females when it comes to emotional intelligence and empathy. And I'll just say, part of it is just kind of the society and the way that we are brought up. And so one simple example that many of you are going to relate with is that the way that boys and girls are raised in regards to their emotions is different. So for example, when boys grow up, right, it's like, hey, you got to be a tough man, you don't cry. And so we are taught to not show emotions, because in the world of the boys, showing emotions would be that you're weak yourself, so you're not a strong man, right? So if you were growing up in primary school and you cry, then the other kids will be, oh, look at that, you're crying, you're weak yourself,
You've
you're
been
this,
bullied like this
right?
before. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
exactly. So we are taught, don't ever cry. And then, we grow up basically as leaders, and there's the expectation, right? Like the alpha male is to lead with authority and hierarchy and all this and that. And, so it has happened, in fact, that in the past, some authorities and leaders, males, that have shown emotion by crying, and then in some people would perceive that as a weakness, right? Because they are showing emotions. Whereas that is not the case for women. That women are mothers, or some women are mothers, and as a mother, the expectation is that you are to show, you're to protect your children with love, and some of the sentiments and emotions associated with love have to do with compassion, with generosity, with these soft skills, the nurturing of embracing your son, with love and tenderness and all of these things. So it is very normal and expected that a woman would have these kind of soft skills. Now, the way that it manifests in the workplace is that many of the it's about 3/4 of the people who follow me are women, and one of the reasons why that is the case is because as they have been growing within organizations as leaders, they've received a lot of coaching that says, as you are moving up the organization, make sure to don't show your emotions. It's almost like be more like a man, right? So and for example, I've had clients that have commented that maybe they like to bake and they want to cook something, and they want to bring something to the office, some cookies, and the coaching is, no, don't do that, because if you're bringing cookies to the office, people are going to think, well, they're not going to see you as a leader. They see you, well, here is the Mother Teresa that is bringing love and this and that, and he's not the top leader
What
that
a
is going
leader she
to,
is, though. What a leader
yeah,
she is. How much she has, impacted people. I mean, I was reading her quote yesterday.
exactly. So in my work, what I try to do is when women come, so I'll tell women, hey, come to my training because I will teach you how to be more empathetic. And say, oh no, Luis, actually, please don't do that. Can you actually do the opposite? Can you help me how to have less empathy? Can you train me how to have less empathy? And say, no, don't think about empathy as something bad. People have been telling you in all your life that having empathy is something bad, but it's not only that it's not something bad, it's a gift. It's a superpower. You were born with this super powerful gift that you have to be empathetic. What we have to learn is the frameworks to be able to put empathy into context, and how you can leverage it to have a more effective leadership, right? Because it is true that, for example, if you are worrying too much about people and you can't make an important decision because you spend days and weeks and thinking about something, of course you're not going to be an effective leader, and the organizations may not benefit from you. But it's about understanding the mechanics of empathy and how we can use someone that is already naturally empathetic or empathic, so that they can then be a more effective leader, incorporating the benefits of empathy into other components of effective leadership.
Yeah, because it's a strength they bring, isn't it? And
Yes.
it's not about bashing it down. And of course, we by no means we mean that empathy is just emotion, because I have had people telling me that, oh, emotion is bad in the workplace. And I have, I'm only, working in, the last 10, 20 years, but still, the first 10 years, the decade of my, corporate career was, you're not there to make friends. You shouldn't be empathetic. You shouldn't show emotion. You should just be tough and get on and, try and get onto the career ladder. So absolutely relate to that. And as a woman, it was much harder. We used to go to the toilet and cry and then wipe our, do our makeup again and come out again. And, but if there are any women in the audience, you may relate to this as well. Thank you so much for sharing this, and how you actually help your female, clients and students and people, you're following, to actually incorporate that and turn it into a superpower, because it is a superpower. Is you need to manage it within the context in order to be effective. I love that.
Yeah, and just one quick thing before we move to the question that I don't want to miss. So historically, the nations, most nations in the world have been led by men, but within the past 10 years, more and more women have come into power in some nations, and they're actually, interestingly enough, through the pandemic, there were some important nations in the world that were led by women. And what many people observed was that the way that women head of countries went about the pandemic was different than the way that men went about the pandemic. And in fact, during a moment like the pandemic, where people needed, people were afraid, scared, and some people were dying, that, it's like a lot of uncertainty and all of that. Women connected with their, women head of organizations connected some, because obviously not all women are the same. But there are examples of women that, as head of, they went on camera being just, at home with their kids in a, and talked about how they themselves were nervous about what would happen, and they were hopeful, and what they were doing, and they were speaking, just from heart to heart, from a human to a human, and the responses were actually more positive. So for the people of those countries, actually appreciated more that than the more of a male kind of called transactional communication.
And it's
Now,
not
go,
exactly, and
go
it's not
get your vaccine,
women, as you're saying, but it's so beautiful. We had a person from Finland joining us earlier as well. So one of the female leaders of Finland, she made good, headlines as well as, was it New Zealand, I believe? Yes.
Zealand, yes.
As well. So very, very beautiful examples. But it's not about men and women. It's about being able, as a leader, to be able to tap into those naturally human skills that we can develop, and how to use them according to the circumstances. But we started already talking about cultures already. So emotional intelligence inevitably links to how cultures are, but also how culture is being created within an organization as well. And I think I loved when we first connected, you shared with me an example. Obviously, I'm half Japanese here as well. That in some countries, we're talking about time and all of this and so on, and flexibility and rigidity. And you were giving me some beautiful examples. And you just mentioned out of the blue, as I am Japanese, in Japan and in Germany, perhaps people may perceive flexibility because in Latino culture, as well as in Greece, being flexible and fitting everything in is a skill that we have to learn. I mean, being adaptable is one of the skill sets we learn since a young age. But it was interesting. You said, actually, these cultures may perceive it as a drawback. And I have experiences in Japan where being flexible is not a thing. It's like, if you're flexible, you're a bit dodgy. You might be a little bit, kind of too flexible for what we like. So yeah, I wanted to ask you, what is the silver lining when cultures collide?
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. No, absolutely. In terms of so I'll answer your question here in a minute, but just interesting how over the world, the way that people think about, like you were saying, rigidity, right? It's like in some countries being rigid and being, by the book, and staying, kind of close to to the rules and following that and stuff is perceived, as something. It's kind of like the discipline, right? So Japanese culture is about discipline, is about order, is about honor, right? And then you have other cultures in the world, for example, the south of Europe and Latin America, South America, where there is a lot of value put into your spontaneity, right? Your ability to be spontaneous, your ability to actually flex and be able to adapt in the moment. So, hey, we were going to have a meeting. The meeting was going to start at 9, but it's going to start at 9:30. I just had a client that told me, hey, we were going to have this thing that was going to start at this hour, but it's now going to start at this other hour. Yeah, great. No problem. We'll adjust to it. Sometimes I go to present something, and when I am right about to start the presentation, somebody says, hey, Luis, what we talked about, you were going to talk about that, take that out of the thing, or add this thing, and it's like, yeah, no problem. So it's developing the ability to actually adapt to the moment and incorporate and kind of not lose the right. So, but I think the opportunity, back to your question in terms of the silver lining, is that I believe that it's a good idea for different cultures to be working together, because we have the opportunity to learn from the best, the best of all worlds, right? Cliche phrase, but it is actually true. For example, I am Latino, so very different from what a Japanese would be, but I have a lot of respect, and I appreciate what Japanese have historically, just kind of overall speaking. For example, I think the sense of honor is very important. For example, Japanese, crime levels in Japan are very low because people don't steal naturally, generally, because they have a sense of honor. It's like, imagine if my family found out, imagine if a camera would film me stealing something, I would, so that would be something very bad, right? So, and there's the sense of, so the discipline, the love for the parents, for the elderly. Now, but we have to open our mind, because, for example, in the US, right, if you're Japanese and you look at kids in the US, kids talk back to their parents. So, from a Japanese perspective, that's something very bad, because it's like, wow, these kids, are disrespectful. They don't honor their parents. They don't respect their parents, right? Because a Japanese kid is not going to talk back to their parents. Now, that's so that's the bad part of it.
Until
But
they
what's the good part of it?
until they become teenagers.
Right, but then what happens that, for example, my kids, if I say something to my kids, they don't take it they will check it. I say something, they go to Google, and they'll come back and say, hey, Daddy, I know you said this, but I just checked in Google, and it's this, and that, and let me offer you my thoughts and this and that. And, so if I was Japanese, I would say that's unacceptable. I'm not going to let you talk back to me. I told you something. This is what it is. You're going to do it. Because it's kind of more, top down, right? Hierarchical. And then whereas here in America, it's more about like the equity. It's like, it doesn't matter that they are a child, they're children, and I am an adult, and whatever. This is about, we all have the same rights. And I actually, in fact, for example, I remember, this is a true story. I was teaching a class, and when I entered the classroom, I was going to teach a class, and I have people from different countries. This is an in-person class many years ago. I was much younger than I am now. So when I entered the classroom, one participant stood up and left the classroom. And it was a Japanese person. The person went to the office of this school where I was teaching and said that he needed to have a different teacher because I was younger than him. So like, he was not going to be able to learn anything from me because I was younger than him.
Wow.
And I was like, what? My biggest and best teachers are my children, who are younger than me, and I learn a lot from them every day. So we can learn something from anyone at any time, from anything. You can see a leaf falling from a tree, and you can think about something, and that's how the law of gravity and everything. It's like, by looking at the world, at things, people, we can learn anything from anyone. In fact, to close that point, because I know I've extended a lot, I know a lot of people disagree with me on this, but here's just a thought that we need to open our minds to. It is possible to learn something. It is possible to learn to accomplish something with the guidance of somebody who has never accomplished whatever that person is helping you to accomplish. That sounds crazy, but I'll give you an example. In the US, Michael Phelps, famous swimmer, right, Olympian, won a world record at the time that he had like the most gold medals that somebody had won in an Olympic competition, right? And the people who trained him to do that had never done that in their lives. It had never been done because, nobody had ever done that ever. right? But those people train Michael Phelps to accomplish something that they themselves had not done and that nobody ever had done. And interestingly enough, in my 10 years or more teaching, in leadership, organizational training stuff, I've seen participants in my classes that have gotten to executive levels and have accomplished things that I myself never accomplished. So I can help somebody to accomplish something that I have never accomplished myself, and it's okay. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is that if somebody, if I said to you, for example, hey, Christina, you have to pay attention to your marriage. I said, Luis, what are you gonna tell? Are you gonna tell me advice? You are divorced. I said, yeah, that's why I learned through divorce. Here are the things that I learned, and I am sharing this with you so that it doesn't happen to you. Or hey, you have to be careful, Christina, with your drinking, because I'm saying, say, what, Luis? You are drunk. And you say, yeah, that's why I'm telling you. Is because even though I haven't being able to, I know the things that it takes. I haven't been able to do it myself, but I can share those with you. And if you take that, you can go ahead and accomplish what I wasn't able to accomplish.
I love your point, because inadvertently what you're saying, if I could summarize it, is that even if you don't have experience in something, the ability to empathize with someone and be there for them can have a huge impact in what they can achieve for themselves, just by being able to resonate with them, to connect with them, and to create that space for them and coach them in this case, rather than tell them because you know better. Of course, it helps. And it's a kind of interesting concept, isn't it? We're going to go into this just to mention it. Coaching and mentoring, slightly different. Coaching is being able to empathize and be in the space with someone and enable them and empower them without necessarily giving the how to. Whereas a mentor, of course, is somebody who's got experience and knows how it's done and can allow people to get there. However, there are some limits, whereas with a coaching, there are no limits. In fact, if you come from a different environment, it's probably better because you can cross-pollinate and you can allow people to go further. I mean, this is mind-blowing. This is, and I'm sure there's many other, concepts involved here. But guys, the power of empathy. I mean, what it can do, huge. But let us get to the next question, because
we have some questions and comments here that we should read.
Yes, Adriana. Yeah. Is that Adriana? Yeah. Is there a difference between being empathetic and having empathy as a skill? Ooh, I like that. It's a subtlety. Yeah. Of course, it will
there is a difference, yes, because if you have empathy, like I said, what if you have a very high level of empathy, but you don't know how to use it? And then, like I was saying earlier, right, the way that it's emotional empathy and empathetic concern. So you're really concerned about, your employees, to the point where maybe, you have employees that are going through a tough time, and then you're absorbing all that, pain with you and all that concern. And just you're so full of these concerns stuff that's actually not allowing you to be able to, to lead effectively, right? Because you're being affected, So for example, if you're a doctor or a nurse and you have empathy fatigue, where you cannot really be effective in your job, and you'll have to take a break and actually go on vacation or something because it is affecting you negatively. Where you can develop somebody that is not empathetic can actually learn to have the skill to use empathy right. So for example, I can learn to be to have more empathic concern, to have more how do you say cognitive empathy. So I can learn to have more cognitive empathy, so that as a leader I can be more effective, right? So not necessarily, it's like everything in life, everything in moderation, everything in balance is about knowing how to use empathy positively and correctly, right? Because for example, you were saying this earlier, Christina, that if you have empathy, but that empathy is making you kind of wanting to, and that doesn't mean that that's what empathy means. But one manifestation of empathy can be that you want to become a people pleaser, like you were saying, and then all of a sudden you don't stand up to your own beliefs and values because you're just kind of following what everybody else is saying. But so everything in moderation is everything, keeping everything in track. Yes.
And thank you, Adriana, for that beautiful subtlety and the clarification that came through your question, because that leads us to the next question, which is about how empathy has become such a buzzword and a soft skill for leadership. It has been marketed till the end of time, really. But I have personally, my clients have come to me with, empathic burnout. And my question, was going to be to Lewis, how can someone manage this empathy fatigue phenomenon? And this is exactly what, Adriana, you just asked. And also, what Jeremy mentions here, experience sometimes is the biggest bias and so on. And you need to be able to switch it on and off. You need to be able to have a filter and use it where it will be effective. Otherwise, you're an empathetic, leaking bucket of empathy and love and concern for everybody. But as a leader, you cannot just stop everything because you're just having an emotional breakdown because somebody lost their child within your organization. And not that it's not important, but actually we cannot stop all operations because somebody is not well. So over to you back, Lewis. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. I think you a great question. You already started to answer it really, really well. And what I would say, just to add to what you said, which was great, is that there are techniques to help you to avoid emotional fatigue, right? And one of those is to concentrate, to focus on action. So there's a model which I don't have a way to show it here, but there's the dusting model, that is detect, understand, share timely and intentionally, which ends with the part of intentionality, which is that when if something's happening to someone. For example, I was just told that a good friend of mine from my from my childhood was operated, had to have surgery as an emergency. He's now stable and he's okay, but it's a delicate, it's not a simple situation. It's a complex situation that may or may not affect kind of his life moving forward. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about him, because he's somebody that is important in my life, somebody that is a great person, has been good to me. And I just, he's stuck in my mind. I can't stop thinking about him. And, so what in that case, right, what I have to do, the technique that I am using is I'm using two techniques or three techniques. One is about optimism. So when I think about him, I activate this idea of, no, he's going to be okay. He's going to be well. Everything. He's a strong man. He's a tough person. He'll navigate through this and stuff. So that's technique number one, right? Technique number two is well wishing. Is then what I do is I basically, I wish him well, and I direct that towards him to send him good energy, right? It's like, so when I think about every time that he comes to my mind and I think about him, then I think that there is a good thing that I'm thinking about him, because then I am one more person that is sending good vibe and good energy to him, and that will help him in his healing process. And the third one is that I have been communicating. It's about like doing an actual action. I have been sending him messages and saying, hey, and I don't know if you can read them or not, but I feel good to express to him, my admiration, my love for him. And I say, hey, my friend, I hope everything is okay, because they told me that he's now, he's talking to people. So because in his work, he uses his cell phone a lot. I've sent him messages that he has to be checking his phone. So when he sees his phone, he knows that I'm thinking about him and that he's important to me and that I love him. And I am sure that he getting those messages is an important component in his healing process. So basically, in this case, instead of me kind of, being, like paralyzed, exactly. I use that as an energy to move forward by doing the best that I can with what's controllable in my hands.
Which is very close to the Stoic philosophy, right? And how, control what you can control, do your very best within your means, and then you have to leave the rest to God and,
to the universe.
Exactly. Beautiful hint here from Shah Jahan, hint for one of the best emotional intelligence is Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verse 16. I need to look it up. Thank you very much for offering.
If Shah Jahan, if you could find it and paste it on the chat, I don't know it.
On the comments.
I'd love to read it.
Thank you so much.
We have Jeremy says, you can learn from your enemies. So it's an
Absolutely.
interesting point here. So it says, who make great mistakes if you pay attention. So sometimes we can learn from those that actually that's an important point in that we have to pay attention to the greatest ones and the not so great because they all teach us something. And when we have a bad boss, for example, we can learn from it. And I have clients that actually tell me that they're thankful to their bad bosses because they learned what not to do. And so we can always learn from the bad
Me too.
from
Me
the
too.
from the
Once I
bad folks out there.
overcame my traumatic experience and I healed it, now I look at it with a very beautiful, kind of rose tinted glasses to say, actually, this person has taught me. Because I wouldn't
Yeah,
have realized the self-realization element you mentioned a couple of questions earlier doesn't necessarily come from empathy.
yeah.
Empathy is
Or
there. But
yeah,
then self-realization and the emotional regulation that we learn from that, we
yeah,
become more resilient. And it's a necessary,
yeah.
process. Sorry, I interrupted
You
you.
know that some people that have accomplished amazing things in their life, and they actually were in a bad relationship, and in the exiting that bad relationship, it's like being in a bad relationship, exiting the bad relationship. They will count that it was part of a fuel, and the genesis, the vibe, the energy to actually go and accomplish. So here in the U.S., there's a famous cook, Paula Deen, and she was in an abusive relationship, and the guy was like so bad with her and all that. And then I think there was this is her speaking publicly, so I'm not saying anything that is compromised. She has spoken out there and kind of shared her story, and she said that in one of those ugly things that her ex-husband would tell her, one day he told her, all what you're going to do in your life if all you know how to do is cook. And then she was traumatized by that sentence that she kept in her mind, that all you know how to do is cook. And one day she woke up and said, hey, if all I know how to do is cook, let's go ahead and cook. And she became one of the most famous, chefs here in the US, and she's super successful and everything is. So she used that, what somebody intended to be something negative to hurt her. She was able to take that and use it as an ammunition and as a fuel to project her to go and do the things that would make her be successful. So
Totally.
sometimes we do learn from our enemies.
Yeah. And it's so important to tune into that moment, isn't it? And not hide away from it as well. And that's where our skills of empathy, being able to be in discomfort, even if it's painful sometimes. And actually, the psychologists call this the post-traumatic growth. More spiritual, gurus will call that kensho, which is the awareness that comes from suffering, of course, using a little bit of the Japanese background here. But absolutely, the empathy is the first point, and then we come into growth. And then we come into being more resilient, and being able to manage bigger situations for ourselves, but also being able to hold the space as a leader, as a human-centered leader for our teams. And that beautifully brings us to the topic of what you teach, many of your clients, because it's not about the emotional intelligence as a whole and how to become more emotionally intelligent. Well, how do you actually fuel that? How do you use that? Where does this land? And I wanted to ask you, what is human-centered leadership? Because there's many labels along, the managerial history of American business literature, from servant leadership, which is the latest perhaps, to
Yeah.
authentic leadership, to, purposeful leadership. There's so many titles, but how is that different to human-centered leadership, which is the one you teach? And how do you use emotional intelligence to help people develop it?
Absolutely. So human-centered leadership is about, connecting with human beings, understanding that we are all humans, and then being in tune and sensitive to, the people that you are leading, right? And having inward focus is paying attention to ourselves, who we are, as human, what are our strengths and weaknesses, right? And then paying attention to, so this is from the work of Daniel Goleman, who I am, a student of, and I admire, very grateful for all the amazing work that Daniel Goleman and his, partners and collaborators have created. But, he has this idea of the inward attention is focusing on ourselves, and then the, outward attention to the other person that we're interacting with, and then, kind of the attention to the whole system, to the ecosystem. And I think that in this case, that in the past, one thing is understanding that leadership, just like everything, evolves. So in different times and different, in different eras in history, different types of leadership have been necessary. So for example, in the industrialization, where it was about productivity and effectiveness and everything, and we got to kind of build and this and that, what our organizations were looking in leaders were people that could push, and they were looking for alpha males that were just kind of very authoritarian, and I had this thing about getting stuff done, right? And we just need to get stuff done. And people would say, it was a very common phrase that people say, I don't care about being liked. I only need to be respected. All I want to be is respected, right?
That was
and that was a leadership that was,
actually,
yeah,
it was
that was a
considered
leadership that was,
at the time.
yeah, needed in the past, and people wanted it. Was applauded. It was, that was the kind of leaders that organizations were looking for. Well, if you fast forward a few decades later, today in this new era with the new generation coming into the place, these people that were born with the internet, that has access to see what is happening, that have a different sense of social justice, that have a different way to connect, with others. So they are born right with the internet. When I was a child, I played video games. I have an Atari, and it was me, me by myself in my room playing Atari, like this ping pong thing, ping pong ping, and I was like just by myself, right? Today, when I look at my children playing video games, they are connected, and they're playing strategy, League of Legends, and they have to do a lot of thinking. They are, connected. They have their headphones, and they're talking to people in England, in Germany, in South Africa, in Japan, in New Zealand, in Argentina, right, in Canada, and they're talking to them and stuff, and they're playing together, they're collaborating with them. So it's about kind of this connection. An important difference too is that in the past, if I was in a meeting and something, it was a meeting with multiple people, and something unfair was being said or done to somebody else, what the training was, the leadership training was, hey, if it's not directed at you, you just kind of stay back. So there was a lot of value being put on know your place. If this is not, if those words or those unjust actions are not directed to you, the best thing that you can do as a leader is step back, stay out of the thing. So, and actually what leaders would do is they would stay, kind of if there's a situation going on out there, something in the media or whatever, hey, just kind of stay back, wait for the storm to pass, and then you will reemerge and kind of come out after everything has been resolved by itself, and it was good. And that's how leaders were leaders. Well, today the tables have turned, and the times have changed, and actually a couple of things. One is that their younger generation, when they are in a meeting and something unfair and unjust is being done to somebody else, even if it's not done to them, they will actually go ahead and they will they will interfere. They will inject themselves and say, hey, either they say, hey, Christina, at the end of this meeting, if you have a few minutes, I'd like to have a few minutes with you in private. And I can say, hey, Christina, sorry, when we were in that meeting, the comments that you have for Jessica, I know you, and I know you intended well, but the way that it came across, I thought that it was unjust and blah, blah, blah. And I can tell you that. Or depending on kind of how I feel and I can manage myself in the situation, some people actually go ahead and say public right there in the meeting, say, hey, I'm sorry, but that is unfair to Jessica and this and this and that. And I've seen it. I myself have seen it in multiple meetings now when somebody stands up and says, hey, I'm sorry. I was in a meeting where somebody told somebody else that you're going to need to apologize to this other person because, okay, that's one manifestation. And the other manifestation that is interesting is that in the past, people were able to remain silent about where they stood in regards to things that were happening in the world. So you were able to just be private about what you thought, and you were able to lead people. That's no longer possible because the new generation, they require and they request that they know about their leaders, who they are, what they have inside, where do they stand, what are their views. So if I am a member of the LGBT community, if I'm a gay man and I am have a leadership, I need to know what my leadership, if they support the LGBT community, yes or no, or where do they stand. If I am Latino, I need to know what is the what stands my leaders have in terms of. And if I work for an organization, if I'm an African American, if I'm a woman and I work for an organization, I need to know where my organization is standing in terms of like protecting and defending and promoting women. And I don't only want to see it written on a website, very beautiful language that says they support women. I want to see it in their actions. I want to see how it is incorporating, how they go about, what are the markets that they serve? What are the products that they serve? What is that? Yeah, I want to see it manifested so that I believe it, that in fact, those people are actually respecting and supporting. And if I feel that my organization and my leadership is not in tune, and that's not, is not really actively supporting my community, I may make a decision of kind of looking to another organization that better aligns with my values. In the past, I would work for that company for that check because I needed, great 401k, and I will take one for my team. I have a family to support, so I would work in a company whose values I didn't agree with, but I would just kind of be getting my deposit on the 15th and on the 3rd, as long as I was receiving an income and being able to pay my mortgage and have my 401k, I was able to look the other way and tolerate things, work for a bad boss, work for companies that were being unfair to
And it
others,
was
companies.
accepted, it was okay, it was going to be a different thing. But now people,
Yeah.
the younger generation, totally, I agree with you. I had
Yeah.
to leave a position beforehand because my values didn't agree. And it's interesting, the values were there, but they were not being, applied on the ground. And we are very demanding as a young workforce, for sure. And it's interesting that a leader is not just a person who just has to get the targets, execute the strategy, has to be responsible for budgets and so on. What you are describing, Lewis, is that actually human-centered leadership is very much grounded in the values and how these are being expressed and manifested on the ground. And leaders need to be public and expressed about those values so that they can engage, they can interact with their people in a way that they can nurture that culture. I didn't know that, actually. I didn't know the subtleties of human-centered leadership, and I definitely feel that I learned a lot today. And Jeannie also is mentioning exactly that the concept of human-centered leadership is language I've been exploring, she says, and it's connected through my work in equine experiential leadership, which is beautiful, by the way. This is something I'm definitely interested in, Jeannie, and team development. And there, empathy extends to being able to empathize with other organisms, right? And other, earthly creatures that, we cannot communicate via cognitive, only perhaps by emotional and, empathetic concern in this case. Well, that is difficult, but that definitely develops a leader in multiple ways. Sorry,
And
Lewis.
I have to say something on what you just said. I love the comments that you're saying. I want to build on that.
Yes.
Interestingly enough, that because we're talking about the evolution of leadership,
Mhm.
it means that to be a great leader, since in time leadership is evolving, you're going to need to learn some behaviors and some skills that that were not natural for you. For example, as a human-centered leadership, one of the bases of human-centered leadership is that we're not perfect, and that we're all, imperfect, and that we're not successful in everything. So, for example, you may be the CEO of a company, and maybe you were very comfortable talking about your successes, or your success story, about how you were amazing and how you. Well, today, people are not connecting with people that are only successful and don't have anything negative in their life. They never made a mistake, for two reasons. One is because, well, I am not that, so I am imperfect. And if you are perfect, then we're just kind of two different individuals. Just go on with your perfection, and I'm just gonna go somewhere else where I work with people that are like me, that are imperfect and stuff, right? The other situation for that is that I may not trust you, I might not believe you, because it's like, well, according to my experience, nobody is perfect. So if you are telling me that you are perfect, you may not be coming out with me with all of the truth. You are hiding information. You're not being transparent with me. And then I also could think, well, because I assume that there are some situations in your life that were not as good, not as positive, not as beautiful, and you're choosing not to share it with me. One is you don't know how to be vulnerable, so you don't have a human side of you. You're not connecting with your human side, and you may not be trusting me because one of the ways in which we build a relationship is that by opening our hearts to other and being vulnerable, we're actually, that's how, like, for example, Christina, you and I, if I say, wow, Christina, this is the first time that I do a podcast, so I am nervous and this and that, I am kind of showing a vulnerability to you. So I am, kind of losing some power by letting you know that, I'm not good or something or whatever. However, that is how I am opening my heart to you to say, hey, I am willing to build a relationship with you that is based on trust, that is based on openness, that is based on transparency. And I'll give you some of my vulnerability. You'll give me some of your vulnerability. And then that's one of the ways in which we'll connect. So a leader today, if a leader has never been shown up publicly, as vulnerable, they're going to need to learn how to do that, because leaders that never show any vulnerability will actually have a higher rate of turnover. Employees don't want to work for a leader that never shows any kind of vulnerability, because they don't think that they are even honest.
Love that. I love that. And that comes back to empathy and how we start trusting. And it has many, many connotations in different ways of being able to influence as a leader. And that beautifully comes to the concept of wabi-sabi that we have in Japan, which is literally linked to eudaimonia, which is a Greek concept mainly, but not only, talked about by Aristotle, the great philosopher. And we basically say in Eudaimonia, which is my brand's name as well, that it's all about being in good balance with our demons, with our spirit, with our good and our bad, with our light and our shadow. And these are not concepts that are being discussed for the first time, but a leader who has self-awareness, to come back to some of our conversation, who is able to see his weaknesses and or her weaknesses, as well as her strengths or his strengths, then only when we can have that honest ability to see ourselves, we can see another in good light and in a supportive environment, and create that environment for all of us to be able to contribute our very best in probably very, imperfect circumstances. Give us COVID, give us, the great, how do we call it? How do we call when people not retire? They quit. The great quit, I think it's called.
Yeah, the quiet quitting and the great resignation.
Thank you. Yeah, the great resignation. I was trying to find, it's not retirement, it's resignation. my brain just went pop. I think the beauty of it is that human-centered leadership sees the human in both lights. Our ability to connect via our vulnerability, but also our ability to really shine and support each other through the value that we create and the values that we share, in the good light as well. And there was a beautiful question. Thank you, James, for your beautiful comment here, that after a certain point, a direct deposit of benefits won't, be enough to justify being miserable while earning those things under poor leadership, right? And, poor leaders,
I have
don't have space in organizations. They will be called out.
Yeah. I want to share something on that. So many years ago in the past, many decades ago, there was a product, famous brand out there that produced mouthwash. And the mouthwash was great. It killed germs that produced bad breath and stuff, and it made your mouth feel clean, everything. But it burned your mouth. It was because it had alcohol, and so that burned your mouth. So some of the customer feedback was, wow, this is burning my mouth. And kind of like the thinking at the time was, hey, that's what it takes. If you want to have your mouth clean, you'll have to get the burn. Take the burn, because take one for the team. That's how your mouth is going to be clean, is by taking the burn. Well, the new generations right now, they try these products and say, yeah, they are great. They clean my mouth and everything, but they have a burn. And he's like, well, that's what it takes. And he said, no, I don't want to have a product that burns my mouth. I want something that cleans my mouth without burning. And it forced these companies to produce a mouthwash that had the ability to kill germs, to protect an animal, to do all of the same things that the other ones did, with an additional benefit. It had zero alcohol, so that it did not burn. Now, why? We're talking here about leadership, and now I'm talking about mouthwash. Why am I talking about something disconnected? Here is the connection. In the past, when people were in the workplace, they said, hey, I know that this leader is producing great results. I know that the company is growing. I know that it's a great ROI, but our team feels miserable. People are looking to resign every time. They're looking to get out of it. They're looking for other jobs. They'll take other positions where they get paid the same or less, as long as they can get out of this misery, right? And the companies, the thinking of the companies was, it is what it takes. You got to take the burn, because, you know, that's how we grow. And we have a leadership that is making this company, the leadership that is effective, because it's killing the germs, right? It's bringing the ROI and the results. That leadership burns. So you got to take the burn. And the new generations, as said, just like they said, I don't want a mouthwash that burns my mouth. They said, I don't want to be in a place where my leader is having unreasonable expectation, who's being, you know, disrespectful to me, that is being, you know, if I am at night receiving emails at 1 and 2 a.m. in the morning over the weekend, I don't want to take the burn. So, you know, I'm going to go somewhere else where it's a zero alcohol company where I don't have to be burning. In fact, and on that note, I want to share an example. In the past, it was very common for people, for companies, to take employees to activities, to games. So they say, oh, you know, let's go to the game. Let's go look at the, you know, we're going to go watch the, you know, the Giants, you know, they're playing a game. And then so the people were in the game, and then at the game was like, hey, you know, what about this? We have to turn in this project on Monday. So, you know, people would engage, and they're talking about, you know, and sending emails and stuff. And they're at the game, and they could see how they were receiving emails, and they had to respond emails where they were at the game. Today, if you tell your employees, your younger employees, that you're taking them to the game, they are expecting to go to the game to watch the game. They're not thinking that they're going to be working. And you know, so when you're with them and, you know, somebody's kind of watching, all right, the pitcher is going to pitch and the batter is going to bat, and then they're like paying attention and stuff. And then you come, hey, you know, what do you say, Maria, you know, I am curious about, you know, do you think you're going to be able to have like the project for money? And it's like, okay, are the guys about to pitch? I mean, are we, because we're in the 9th inning, you know, this is what is going to tell us whether we win the game or we lose the game. Are we working or are we watching the game? Because if we're working, we might as well go back to the office, and let's not come to the stadium if we're working here. Or if you have your phone and you're receiving all these emails, or all these work emails from people that are there with you at the game, then it's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be coming to the game, where everybody that is coming from the office to coming to the game, they're working while we're here in the game. You know, it's that. So as a leader, you need to learn then, okay, to be able to retain this new generation of workers. When I invite them to the game, I need to learn the ability to say what is important and what is urgent. And if something is urgent, I can bring it up, but I have to do it in the right context. I will come to you, Christina, and say, and see what's going on with the game, if it's the last inning or what's happening, if it's something that you're going to miss or whatever, and find what maybe you're going to walk to go somewhere, you're going to get some water, or you're going to the restroom, and say, hey, Christina, do you have a minute? Hey, sorry to bring this up at the game. I know, you know, it get me super excited, but there's something urgent that I need to tell you. And although I could tell you on Monday, I would prefer to tell you now. Is that okay? Can I? And you say yes, and then I can bring it up and stuff. But you know, if we're at the game, we're at the game. If we're working, we're working. It's a new day. It's a new generation. We're gonna learn to work with them. Otherwise, we're not gonna be able to retain them.
Yeah. And I think the beautiful connection you're making here for me is that human-centered leadership means you need to tune in, as you said. So if you're gonna, guys, keep anything from here, is using emotional intelligence and empathy to be able to tune in to where the other person is, and actually being able to lead. And some people might say, again, some people can use it manipulatively, but actually if the values are there and if they're shared, and if there is, you know, a response loop, you know, a feedback loop, then actually the leader will be learning a lot from the younger generations, and not just an age thing, but from different industries as well.
Yes.
And I think that you beautifully answered the next question, which I was going to ask you, which was from David Sanchez Wells, who asked us on the event on LinkedIn. How do you propose to measure the ROI, the return on investment of such soft skills, you know, such as empathy, emotional intelligence, human-centered leadership in a corporate setting? Because, you know, and you already started talking about it. It would be really nice if you know, and you talked about the morale and the miserable staff and so on. And Simon Sinek has very much talked about emotional safety as the role of a leader of today's, you know.
Yeah, it's like, for example, people contact me all the time and say, hey, Luis, we love your training. We would love for you to come and train our leaders, right? And they say, you know, give us an estimate, you know, give us a quote, how much you would charge us. And then when I tell them, they're like, wow, you know, that's like, it's a high cost. And I say, no, that is not a high cost, because the higher cost is to have your employees led by leaders that are not trained. So having employees led by untrained leaders is the highest cost. Why? Because they're going to leave. You know, first is productivity is low. If morale is low, productivity is low, because there is a correlation between morale and motivation. So if there's low morale, there's low motivation. If there's low motivation, then there's lower self-esteem. People don't feel good about the work that they do, and with that, they don't have the motivation and the fuel and the inspiration to do better work. Not only, both in quantity and quality. They'll do less work, and they'll do less that is of less quality, because the best work that you do is the work that you do with love. And to feel love, you need to feel good with yourself, with where you are, with your leaders, with the environment. When you come to your workplace in the morning, Monday morning, when you come in, you have to be happy to be in that workplace. You have to feel good, and you have to like your peers. You need to feel that your peers are good people that mean well, that are there to do great work, and that the work that you do with them is better than the work that you would do by yourself, because you have to believe it in your heart that the power and of the formula, the winning formula, is the power of a combination of your thoughts, your expertise, all that with the expertise of the others. And you have to enjoy working with them, and you have to have fun at work. So how do you measure the specific question in terms of how can you put a number to emotional intelligence and human-centered leadership? Is that one easy one is retention, right? So if the retention has a very high cost, because you have to be all the time that you spend all of the energy in trying to bring people. In fact, every time somebody leaves, not only that you're losing the person that is leaving, but the work that was all of the responsibilities of that person that left are then transferred to employees that were already overworked. So you have employees that now are going to be are going to have a lower job satisfaction. So job satisfaction is linked to results, to productivity, right? So if you're already overworked and people are leaving in the office, and every time somebody leaves, they're going to be giving me more work, well, then I have less time to do good work. The quality of my work is going to decrease, and eventually that's going to make me think too, should I be leaving this place, right? So from a retention standpoint, you're going to have a lower engagement standpoint. And the other part, yeah, so that's on the negative side, right? Yeah, and then on the positive side, when you have employees that are, when you have leaders that have higher levels of emotional intelligence, those are leaders that are better self-aware. They have a higher sense of self-awareness. They know who they are. They are aware of how the power that they have or to make other people feel something, not only negative, so that they avoid making people feel bad, but they also realize the power that they have to make people feel good and to learn what are the things that make my team feel good. It's about, being having gratitude to them, to tell them that they've done a great job. When somebody, if somebody has a difficult situation in their life, they're experiencing a tough moment, they're having a divorce, somebody's mother is sick, they just lost a pet, or they are sick, or whatever is going on, that they know that they have the power to make them feel better, psychological safe, by having a word of compassion, by having a word of support. When they make a mistake, they say, no worry, Christina, we're here to learn. I'm going to be here by your side. You are okay. Because people do great work or better work when they have a sense of they have a safety net, that they know. Because see, look, for example, in the banking industry, for example, so I've worked in financial services for many years, and when there have been some scandals that have made it to the media, when they've done some investigation, the reason why employees did not so employees knew that something was going on, and two things happened. One is some employees prefer not to bring it up, because in their previous experiences, every time that they brought up something, they were penalized, right? And they had to live through the repercussions of bringing up that something was bad, was wrong. So they didn't feel comfortable to bring up. It's like your kids. If one of your kids says, hey, daddy, mom, this kid in school is smoking, he's using drugs. Oh my God, how and you make them feel bad. They're not going to come back and tell you, and when something happens, right? Because they have to feel good with us. It's the same thing with employees. And the second thing that has happened actually in many industries is that when there has been a scandal because something that bad that happened, have done the investigation, actually some of the employees had brought up what was happening, and then these managers actually, kind of like the people that they were reporting to, they were actually not, they just retained information and went back to them and say, no, this is like, they wouldn't do anything with it. So then, and in some cases, when an employee feels from a morality standpoint, from a high sense of ethics, if somebody feels that something is wrong, and they bring it up to their managers because they want to see action. They want to see the situation being taken care of, and they see no action and they don't know what's happening. They're not giving information what's happening. Some of them will actually leak the information out. They'll go to the media, they'll tell somebody else outside of the organization, and that's how some of these scandals have happened, because they are really tied to their sense of ethics, the sense of value. They say, I cannot sleep if I know that there is this thing that is being done wrong, unethically. And if my company doesn't do something about it, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna let this information leak out, so that then my company
It wasn't
will
dealt
react.
with. There was no space
It's not
within.
dealt with. Yeah.
Leader didn't create the culture, nor the feedback loops, nor the space for it to be addressed within, because mistakes happen all the time. And I think, sometimes it's neglect, sometimes it's actually unethical leadership, or one person might be, benefiting from something that another, is not agreeing with, or, financial scandals in this case. But I think the important thing is to be able to have a team that will be able to bring it up honestly and say, let's look at ourselves, all of us, including the leader. Beautiful, beautiful. I think, we have covered so much and we could keep going forever. However, I think, it's an opportunity for our audience, if there are any questions to Luis, on either emotional intelligence or empathy or human-centered leadership, perhaps how it applies to you. What examples do you have to share with us on when it worked, when it didn't work, how this is evolving? But this is the latest information, but also sharing from Luis and his work out there in the world with leaders out there globally on human-centered leadership and emotional intelligence. And we have something from Anthony. In Europe, they call these people whistleblowers, absolutely, the leakers.
That's a great point. It has a negative connotation here. It's like it's something bad, when in fact it's something positive, right?
Yeah. Simply because, a small part of the society thinks this is correct doesn't mean it is correct, right? And, we blame them for being the whistleblowers. Interesting point. Thank you, Anthony, for bringing this forward. And Mosfera, in today's corporate setting, some people view showing empathy as a sign of weakness, and we touched upon that. Also, some people say honesty and loyalty don't exist in current corporate setting. How do you guys view it? Do you think it's right? Juicy question for you, Luis. Would you like to give it a go?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. No, I think that in the past, the times are changing, and I think I am encouraged by things that I have experienced when I talk. So I do a lot of research with different generations, and I am encouraged with some positive things that I'm seeing. And one of them is that the sense of social justice. So I think in the past, people were kind of like, because the information was not shared as openly, then people could get away with certain things, right? Now, for example, let's bring up an example that would be relevant for more people. So we are all aware that there is a gender disparities in the gender disparity, where women around the world make less than men, and that's for doing the same work. Women that have equivalent education, equivalent preparation, that are as good on two peers that are comparable in everything, and an organization feels more comfortable paying more to a man than they do to paying to a woman. That is wrong. That's unfair. That's unjust. That's unacceptable. However, that's how it had always been. And because there was no transparency, many women never knew that they were being paid less. So a woman was very excited about how much she was being paid, and she was happy and everything. And she got to the end of her career and she died, and she never knew that her peer, that was a male, was making 50 or 100% more, and she had no idea. Well, today, with platforms like Glassdoor and many other platforms, LinkedIn and many others, and actually the new generations that were born with the internet and social media, they feel more comfortable sharing things that in the past people would never share. For example, in the past, people would never share how much they make, and some companies would make it illegal for you to. So it would be, when you sign a contract, say that you could never talk to anybody about your compensation, because if you did, you could be terminated. And there were laws that prohibited people to talk about salaries. It's like, well, if you're compensating your people, transparently and correctly, yeah, why should it be why should people be prohibited about talking about how much they make? If if you're doing it all well, it should be fine. Athletes, and there are many industries where in public government, all elected officials, their salaries are, you can go online and look at their compensation. So if in many industries and in many fields it is completely public to know how much somebody's being compensated, why in the corporate world it was always a secret how much people made? One of the benefits of having secret salaries was it gave people the ability, gave organizations the ability to pay female less and males more. So the new generations, they want to know. So you have younger male employees that want to know how much people know, because they would feel uncomfortable if a woman is making less, and they would fight for it even though it is not affecting them directly, right? So that is kind of one of the changes that we are seeing, and I've seen, I can tell you.
And it feels much more, that the English-speaking world is a little bit more advanced in this. But actually, even with cultures like Japan and Greece, where we are more private about how much we're making and so on. I mean, coming from both of my cultures, I would never really ask anybody how much you're making, or they would never ask me. Whereas, ask an American, as we say, and they're very much happy to tell you exactly, all the percentages and everything.
Not everybody, but some will tell you how much they make. And I've been in places where people voluntarily tell me how much they make without me asking them. So not everybody would do that, but more and more people are feeling comfortable. Yeah. But now if you are, as an organization, if you have an open job that, if you have a job opening for people to apply, more and more organizations have to disclose how much you're going to pay for that. So now the job descriptions include the salary range, which in the past would have been something crazy.
Which is an interesting thing, which is more than emotional intelligence and human-centered leadership here. Now we're going into ethics, we're going into societal issues, we're going in a global environment. I mean, how much do you pay somebody who's a CEO there and a CEO there? But these are different issues that perhaps, human-centered leadership will solve rather than, divide us further. I mean, these are huge challenges of leaders in a global environment today, with all of this becoming public more and more. But coming back to Mosfera's question here, about the empathy being a sign of weakness, and of course she blends in the honesty and loyalty part. It's not always present in current corporate settings. And the question to you, Luis, is, okay, how do you see that? Because we talked about, as the ROI, the return on investment, perhaps being the loyalty, perhaps being the productivity and the honesty, but actually not necessarily per se. It's the cumulative result that these create in an environment and the morale, right? If I'm understanding.
I'll give you an example. So historically, car manufacturers, when they manufacture this car, the team would come up with a discovery that a certain line of cars that was already sold, that people were driving in different countries and stuff, had a defect. And in fact, some defects that could cause the car to flip, or something in transmission to break down, could put the safety of the families of those people who bought the cars in danger, in fact producing fatalities, right? Fatalities, right? People could die from the defects of making the car. And even so, they had the information and they were completely aware of the defects of the car. They would do the math. They would use Excel or whatever they use for their finance, and do the calculation. Yeah, they do the calculation and say, well, the cost of this death, and even if they do present lawsuits against us, is lower than us going ahead and reclaiming, recalling all those cars and having to give new cars to all these people. So we might as well just leave it like that, let people have their accidents, die, and then we'll just pay whoever complains, because not everybody will complain. And so those who make the connections and actually identify that in fact the cause of the accident was a defect in the car, and fight us because we're big and they're small. Those who fight us, it's going to cost us this, we'll pay that, and we'll just move forward. And they would not tell the society, the people, their customers. They would not inform their customers that they sold them a car that was defective, right? And in fact, when the car started, they say that they had a defect in the engine, in the transmission, and they were well aware of it. And then the customer would call in and say, hey, you know that my car is I feel something in the engine, it's malfunctioning. Oh, well, you're going to have to bring it to the dealership, and we're going to, and actually they would charge you to inspect the transmission or the engine or whatever it was, even though they already knew that it wasn't a manufacturing problem. And then they would charge you to inspect it. And then they would say, oh, you know what? Your car needs a new transmission, or your car needs a new engine. And they will sell you not only the new part of a car, the new engine, whatever it was and stuff, but they will actually charge you to install it. So they will charge you to replace a part that was defective by them, and they will charge you for the labor to fix a problem that they themselves caused. So that is, you see that today, because that is when you are focused on results, when you're focused on ROI, you do that. But today, in the world of social media, in the world of internet, the customer can go online and realize that the experience that they're having with their car is the same experience that hundreds of people out there are having. So now this wasn't caused because of something that I did to this car. This is that the manufacturer made a mistake here. And now companies will have to be very careful about how they go about it, because it will be more difficult to keep these things under the rug and be dishonest and be secretive and be, non-transparent with something, because people can now look at the records, they can see you knew about this. And if there are that, they're going to have to be responsible for those, because it's more possible and it's easier to demonstrate that in fact an accident was caused by a defect of a manufacturing company. So it's new times. We gotta, so yeah. The car manufacturers have to hire a new kind of leader. It's the leader that says, when the team comes in and says, we have found out that there is a defective thing, it's like, instead of, oh, let's not hide it, do the calculation to see what's cheaper. No, it's what is the right thing to do. The right thing to do is we have to recall those cars. Why? It's more expensive, but we're going to save life. We don't want people to die because they were in the vehicles that are company. And if it's a Japanese company, well, it's the owner that we don't ever want a life to be lost because of defective car or vehicle that was made in our plants.
Exactly. And beautiful example. And it kind of makes it urgent that most problems are not going to hopefully cost a human's life. But what about if it's environmental issues and so on? And how the moment we step through the door, a virtual door nowadays, the moment we step into an environment where we open our laptops, for the majority of us that perhaps we may not be, attending, a factory perhaps, or a manufacturing unit and so on. How do we think that being employees makes us dissociate from us being customers, from us being members of the society, of being the consumers of the products we produce, whether that's a service, whether that's a product, whether that's, and how can perhaps, without empathy, ever be able to bridge that gap in ethics, is a question I want to leave our audience with. And Luis, I want to thank you so much for your contribution, for sharing your wisdom today, for answering those very juicy questions beautifully for our audience today. I hope everyone in the audience who's still with us or who will be watching enjoyed the way in which Luis navigated, touched upon so many different topics, and most importantly, touched our heart today. Thank you so much, Luis, for being with me today.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for your generosity to share your time and your space and your beautiful platform that you built with so much work for all these years, to engage in these conversations that are important, and to have the empathy to want to open your mind and your heart to other perspectives, and then to engage. I'm glad that we're having these conversations. I am very happy with the work and the collaborations that we've done, and it is my hope that we have the opportunity to do more together. And then I'd like to thank each one of you that joined us today, either if you're watching this live with us, or if you're watching this on demand afterwards. Please do consider these thoughts and these perspectives, and feel free to, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, feel free to send me an invitation. I'd be more than happy to support you.
And I will also go through all of the channels that we have communicated and broadcasted through today. And I will put all the social media handles for Lewis, so you will be able to find him very, very soon. So bear with me, give me half an hour, and I will be able to update all of our channels shortly so that you can connect with the amazing human from Minnesota, USA, Lewis Moreno, who taught us and shared with us real examples of emotional intelligence, empathy, and human-centered leadership.
Thank
Big
you,
round
thank you,
of
Christina. And
applause.
I just
So much.
I'll take half a minute here quickly. Well, first is Jeremy, Mosfera, Anthony, Adriana, so many people that have been, Joseph. Thank you so much for your kindness and your
Thank you.
generosity with your words. Very appreciated. And I want to leave us with an exercise. I was actually reflecting about this. That an exercise to build empathy is to develop the interest in caring about somebody else's something. So is to think about a problem that is not affecting you directly, but is affecting somebody else. And then first is to try to make time and do the work and, kind of dedicate some of your attention to try to understand that problem that is affecting somebody else that is not affecting you, and to try to connect and say, this is, something that is affecting somebody else and how is it affecting them and all that. And then in the spirit and the exercise of building empathy, to building that muscle to care about somebody else's something, is to think about what is it that you could do to show publicly your support to a group that you don't belong to. So for example, and women, there are a lot of opportunities in women because there are major gender disparities that the world has been unfair to women and have not recognized the value and the role of women in life and in history. And if I am a man, I have to think about, first is I have to have the commitment to learn more about how the injustices that are being done to women, and to think then actively as a leader, what are things that I can do to try to fix this problem, to try to do something that would help
To bridge the
more
gap.
and more women to close the gap, right? So that's one example with women, right? For example, animals, animal cruelty, what is happening right now with animals. So for example, I've reduced significantly my consumption of animal meats because I've spent the time to learn more and more about the industry, meat industry and all that, how they are treating animals. And that's made me, I'm not 100% vegetarian because I'll eat, chicken here and there, but I have significantly reduced my consumption of meat. And then another example is, for example, I brought up earlier as an example, the LGBTQ community, right? So I have to think, okay, I'm not a member of the LGBTQ community. And so, but I recognize that I have, I have people in my relative circle, in my friends, in my colleagues at work, people that I appreciate, that are, amazing people. They have excellent contributions to the world. And they are a member of a community that has been unfairly treated, that is actually that is the subject of a lot of injustice. And then first is, how do I learn more? Second, how I become an ally so that I can help to protect them and to defend them and to promote them and to elevate them. And then how I could publicly find a way in which, through a symbol, an icon, a sign, I could wear something or do something, put something in my office, in my car, or whatever, where I communicate to others, I'm here for you. I support you. I know you. I see you. I acknowledge you. I feel you up, because that can make a difference in somebody else's day, to know when somebody is going through a tough difficulty and could be making a decision, in some cases, to take their life. It will make a difference to know that there is somebody else out there that knows about them, about the concerns that they're going through, and that are, somebody that is willing to actually publicly demonstrate their support to them. So when you see it, you're like, I'm not alone, and you may be more able to have peace and hope in your heart.
Absolutely. Thank you for this powerful message of, really, the invitation is to learn and ask questions to someone that you cannot possibly relate, that is so different to you that you wouldn't find common ground, only to realize that there is so much more common ground than difference there. Thank you so much, Lewis. And thank you also, Bakari Konate and Shah Jalan. Oh, thank you. Thank you for your email.
Joseph Merlin, Jeremy Swenson.
Attendance, please. Absolutely was a masterclass from Lewis Moreno. Thank you so much. Big, big hug all the way to Minnesota. And hope to see you again for part 2 very soon. Take good care, everyone. Thank you for spending the Sunday evening or mid-afternoon now with us. Take good care and have a great
day, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.